This video is going to be one of the most advanced so far, covering the combination of ghost notes with other features of Renoise and Redux, notably modulation, effect commands, and phrases. Dealing with ghost notes is going to be technical enough as it is, so in order to keep this concise and understandable, I'm going to assume you're already familiar with the other factors surrounding this topic. And just so there's no confusion, this technique doesn't serve the same purpose as the traditional musical term. It's actually something taken forward from older trackers. But as you might expect, the potential effects can be much greater here, even though it's performed in exactly the same way, which is that a ghost note is a note in a pattern or phrase editor that's had its instrument or sample number removed by the user. When played, it will retrigger the most recently played instrument or sample in its column, but with some useful differences from the normal behaviour. Before we go any further, it's incredibly important to wrap your head around exactly what a ghost note will be retriggering, because this can vary depending on the point at which song or phrase playback has begun. What's triggered is the previous regular note that has been encountered in this column. So, if the song or phrase is started from a point where any ghost notes are played after a regular note was played, then this is not a problem. But if a ghost note is played without having encountered a regular note during this playback, then the instrument or sample triggered will be the last one ever played in this column. Now, this can actually be from a previous playback of the song or phrase. And for the pattern editor, this also includes any instrument that has since been manually played by the user with the cursor in this column. So you can see how important it is to keep this in mind when you're using ghost notes. And with that trickiness out of the way, we can move on to what the benefits can be for your music. Although playback of an instrument samples are restarted, the modulations are not. They continue uninterrupted. This affects all of the instrument samples with regard to the modulation set that they've been assigned. If you'd like this modulation benefit to apply to an instrument that's using phrases, then you'll need to create the ghost notes within the phrase itself. In a previous video, we looked at a way to create a free-running LFO, and ghost notes can be an alternative to the technique shown there. But that method allows you to target specific modulation sets and devices of your choosing, while ghost notes will simply apply to all of the affected sets as a whole. The volume and panning values of the original note are passed on to the ghost notes if they don't specify their own values. When a value is specified though, the changes apply to that individual ghost note only, meaning that the values will revert back to the original form for each consecutive ghost note. None of this applies to delay values though. But the other things that are affected are the I and O effect commands in both the volume and effects columns, and the J and K commands in the panning column. These will continue fading in or out, or panning left or right, without restarting for ghost notes. Everything mentioned in this section applies to playback within phrases as well. But does not work when ghosting phrases from the pattern editor. While the previous two sections applied to samples only, this one also applies to the plugin and MIDI components of an instrument. When an instrument makes use of phrases, ghosting it from the pattern editor doesn't restart the phrase playback, but instead it performs the same function as an instant glide. While this is convenient by itself, it's the combination with phrase switching that makes it so powerful. Switching from one phrase to another, and continuing from where the previous one left off, can normally only be done by inserting that specific line with SXX. However, using a ghost note will make this process automatic. And finally, when switching to a phrase that uses ghost notes, remember that the sample to be triggered in each column will be the last one ever played there.